Hello and welcome back to the Legendary Chiropractor Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brent Janogan. This is season 16, episode 7. Tonight we have Dr. Haley Turpin. She's a graduate of Life University. She's a principled doctor of chiropractic. She is also a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator with over 200 hours of embodied training through the Pause Breathwork Certification Program. She is also a polyvagal informed chiropractor through the Prana Foundation that focuses on Dr. Stephen Porges' Polyvagal Theory. Dr. Haley's mission is to help facilitate safety in the body so that one may have access to the innate knowledge and guidance within them. Dr. Haley is currently a chiropractor at Tree Hive Chiropractic in Parker, Colorado. Dr. Haley, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Brent. I am so excited to be here. I know the conversation we're going to dive in tonight is just going to be a fun one. And any conversation that goes that way, it's just the knowledge that comes out of your brain and out of our mouths. It's just really cool to get to see. And I'm excited that other people get to hear the types of conversations that I feel like we have. It's going to be fun.
I'm so excited for this conversation. You always bring such amazing spice and life to life, and I'm just excited to dive in this conversation. But before we do that, let's hear from our amazing sponsors that allow this podcast to happen.
Total Clinic Solutions is your go-to source for purchasing both brand new and refurbished chiropractic equipment, as well as phone support for repairs and maintenance. Call Derek and allow him to combine your wishes and his 23 years of chiropractic equipment expertise to find what's best for you and your patients at 704-622-4089 or head to TotalClinicSolutions.com now. True Chiro, helping chiropractors explode their practices and save more lives by shifting the perception of what they do from neck and low back pain to being about the brain and nervous system, leading to increased retention, more referrals, higher case averages, but most importantly, better patient outcomes for more than just neck and back pain. For more information, check out the link below, truechiro.org. Again, that's truechiro.org.
And we are back. All right, Dr. Haley, we are diving into something that's truly life-changing. It is profound. It is impactful. That is breath work.
What is... Yes, Brent. Sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
What is breathwork? Can you inform us?
That is a beautiful question. I've been asked by many friends, they're like, breathwork? I breathe every day. I don't understand why you're raving about this. And Brent, I can tell you over all the years that I've done healing, I've seen coaches and therapists through my own journey. Breathwork has truly changed my life because it's taken the transformation that I would see over 9 to 10 months. And I will see that change in 2 to 3 months. It's just amazing. Wow. It's how much it's taking the work that we can do to heal ourselves and bringing it into the body. And for those of you who don't know what that means, trust me, we're going to dive heavily into what that means tonight to be in your body and do healing from that place. And breathwork is the most profound tool that I've experienced to be able to self-regulate and drop into your body and do healing.
So could you maybe guide us through a couple of breaths of what breath work would be or feel like?
Yeah, I would love to. That's actually great. The two of us can ground here together. And what we'll do, Brent, just to bring some presence and set some intention for this conversation, with two people here, just being able to look each other in the eyes, we're going to take 5 really slow breaths in through the nose and letting it go out through the mouth. Okay, and I'll go ahead and start us here.
All righty.
And just like that, Brent, taking the time to be with another person, look each other in the eyes and really allow our bodies to share that space and to find that coherence with each other alone is so healing for so many people. And that was just a quick example. And I don't know about you, but I feel a lot more grounded right now.
Yeah, each breath I felt like I was just getting more and more present. I was almost like a
Mm,
buzz or like it's this little electrical shock where I was
mhm.
feeling more each breath.
Yeah, absolutely.
So breath work. How did we get into breath work? How did you become a facilitator? How did you find this foundation, the Pause Foundation, and go get
Mhm.
or Pause program it and go get certified? What led you to want to go to that link?
That is a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that, because when I talk to students currently who are going through the program, my favorite thing to tell them is when you're in school, I know you've got tons of books you're diving into. I know you've got the tests, you've got the exams, you're doing your practicals, but making sure that you are putting in time to do your own healing
Mm,
is what's going to set you up for success in the way that you show up for people after. So for me, it was going through my own healing journey while in school. And for me, it was a lot of doing more of the feminine work, which is that inward slowing down, meditation, really listening to my body, even though I had no idea what that meant at that time. And where my journey started was for what I think most people begin, mental health is a big part of my history. So I had lost someone very close to my life. I'll go ahead and say it. I'm going to be transparent here. I lost my mother to suicide at a young age in college. And that really triggered a lot of questioning of things, right? Like,
mm,
how did we get here? Who am I? What am I doing? Right? Those big questions in life that sometimes for some people it takes a big um, trauma to happen for you to begin asking those questions. And the only place I knew where to begin was to go to talk therapy, right? Go find a therapist and talk about your pain,
right.
talk about what happened, talk. And then it transitioned into, getting into self-help books. So reading the books, watching the motivational speakers, and I was really gaining tools in my mind to help me begin to shift or try to make sense of what was going on, right? What began to change is through working with a coach who was a trauma informed breathwork facilitator. We would have conversations, but she would always lead me into, let's get into your body. And I was like, what does that mean? And that is when she started really teaching me through the breath that when you get into your physical body, that is the place where you truly store that trauma, where the emotions that maybe at the time when trauma happens, and when I say trauma, it doesn't have to be, what I shared about my story. It could be, not being heard. It could be someone gaslighting you, whatever that may be, and a longer path. But in the moment, if you did not have the capacity to adapt to it, it was there to serve a purpose, wasn't it?
Mm,
So your body's going to go, this happened for a reason, but you didn't have the capacity. So I'm going to go store it in your body. And when we go inward to process it, you will get what you needed out of it later. The problem is we are not trained or shown how to go inward to then process what happened. We just add all these traumas over years and years and years, and we wonder why we're sick. And our capacity to handle stress just isn't very strong. So I lost track because I love it. So we got into the breath work. From there, my coach, again, the change and transformation I was seeing over almost a year or two was happening in very short periods of time within months. And I was like, there's got to be something to this. I need to share breathwork with the world. Truly, it became that big. I was like, people have this powerful tool with them every moment of their lives, sleeping, waking, and they can access it at any moment and begin to heal and empower themselves into the world, the life that they desire for themselves, and also heal past trauma. And then that's when I joined. That was where my coach came from, was the pause breathwork. That's where I jumped in.
that's amazing, and it's I love that you I love that we always have our breath. Like I'm always talking to my patients about, find your breath, get in your breath. When you're on the table, take a couple deep breaths and just, you're on a beach. It's like one of my favorite sayings. I'm like, you're on a beach. Just let it go. Just
Mm-hmm.
find the warm rays, find the beach, like, the tide of the ocean hitting the beach. Like, find something to slow you down, because it seems like people are so dysregulated with their breath. They're caught up here.
Mm-hmm.
They're hyperventilating. They're not getting full breaths. They're not even getting full
Mm-hmm.
diaphragmatic activity. The activation of
Mm-hmm.
the diaphragm. You don't get full movement in full inhalation unless we really breathe into the belly, and
Mm-hmm.
that's more of a parasympathetic tone. It's more of that. Oh, oh, that's nice. And you just
Mm-hmm.
let go versus being caught up here. I find myself when I'm breathing here, I'm so much more anxious, and I have a lot of guilt and worry, and just I feel overwhelmed when I'm up here in my breath versus in my
Yeah.
belly with my breath.
Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing is, Brent, is when you find, like, let's say your power is coming from up here, even though long term it's not serving you, you get to use where you're most resourced to feed into where your breath is not wanting to go. Instead of almost having to force, I'm not breathing here, and you can feel like, right, your intention, I'm forcing myself to. But there's something very special about honoring maybe I'm up here right now and there's a lot of shame in there and there's a lot of guilt, like you were saying, but that's where my life force is. That's still where my power is.
Mm.
But then how do you use that space to be able to go into the parts of yourself that are not feeling safe enough to welcome in that breath? And then they start to balance each other out. And that's where we really, when we talk about breath work, we get into doing work around your parts. Because when you start diving deep into this magical world of your body, you've got these parts of yourself. Some of your parts are holding on to trauma. Some of your parts are filled with shame. Some of your parts are just your love. For
Mhm.
me, it is in my heart. For some people, their gratitude and love is in their sacrum or in their power center, right? So it's knowing where your parts are and then how do they work together to feed into the parts that maybe aren't welcoming in that life force, that breath, but we can balance each other out whenever we know our parts better. But it takes getting into the body.
I love that. Um, Applied kinesiology talks about organ health and emotions that are
Mm,
associated with different organs, and how like the liver or the was the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder is like frustration, anger, and
mm,
rage or something like that. And so you'll find that if you have a lot of frustration and anger, things are very they cause you to respond impulsively and very aggressively. That typically is associated with the liver or if
mm,
the stomach or the pancreas. And it's there's also there's different techniques in Chinese Eastern medicines that actually have correlations to organs for uh, masculine versus feminine energies.
mm,
The liver, I believe, was connected to the father as well as frustration and anger.
mm.
So it's interesting whenever you're having quote unquote daddy issues, uh,
Yeah.
that could draw forward some aggression or some frustration, which then typically we go to the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
That could just be some type of manifestation for not dealing with some emotions. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see that a lot. You really start to see people's actions and how tied in they are with things going on inside of our body, whether we're aware of it or not. Which is why I say, wouldn't you prefer to have the awareness of it? Because you still know you're making the choice.
Mm.
That's, I mean, for me, that is what I love is at least I'm aware of it. When I go to bake my cookies, chocolate chip cookies are my thing, I at least know the awareness of Haley, you are going to bake these cookies, these little sugar bombs because you're stressed and you know that you are wanting to numb something. But you know what, Dr. Brent, when I still do it, I know it was my choice.
Mm.
Does it happen near as often? Absolutely not. Because 9 times out of 10, with that awareness, I'm like, this isn't going to serve you long term. But even when I do, it was my choice. I had the awareness that that is an action I take when I have usually shame come up or a lack of or unworthiness that comes up. I'm like, whoop, let's go fill my body with sugar. I don't want to feel that. That's heavy.
Isn't it funny we find that we revert to substances like sugar to offset emotions? Like the saying from that Austin Powers movie is like, "Eat because I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because I eat." But
Mm-hmm.
I used to be that way. I used to be
Mm-hmm.
heavier, and I would eat because I was unhappy, but I was unhappy with my body because I was eating all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And it was, uh, it wasn't until I became aware and I started to sit with my body that I started to
Mm-hmm.
find answers of, maybe I shouldn't eat, 12 donuts in one sitting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love that. And look where you are now. I mean, truly, it's super inspiring to see that the way you take care of yourself physically, because that is the foundation, right? That's the foundation before you jump into mental, emotional, and spiritual health, is taking care of your body. And I can say this with so much confidence that you are such a leader, especially during school when it was easy to have excuses. You were always in the gym. You were always prioritizing and learning new things to take care of your physical health better. So, a great example right in front of me.
Ah, thank you so much. And it's just I want to inspire others. So it's like be the example. We're doctors. We are the epitome of health and wealth, and I want to be
Mm-hmm.
for other people to look at me and say, I want to be able to achieve that too, and maybe look back. You absolutely can.
Mm-hmm. You absolutely can. And Brent, I want to mention what you were saying about, your habits of noticing that you're eating, but then you're unhappy with your body. There comes a point where what I find for most people is when you start going to those outside substances or habits to numb what you're feeling in the inside. And in fact, I'm going to put it out there, the world promotes it. Like you don't want to deal with what's in front of you. You don't want to have that hard conversation with your partner. Guess what you can pick up in 2 seconds? Your phone, and you can distract yourself. And it is numbing you from feeling discomfort or whatever emotion you're feeling in your body. And I say this because this comes back to my mission that I shared with you of like bringing safety to the body, because when you are so used to numbing yourself and feeling the sensations and this uncomfortable emotions in your body year after year after year after year, it's no wonder that I have adults lying on the table and you ask them to take a deep belly breath. They have no idea what you're talking about, nor do they want to, because them getting out of their mind and bringing their conscious awareness, their consciousness into their body in that present moment means they feel so much and they don't know if they can handle that consciously or unconsciously. That's hard for so many people in our world today. And that's why my number one priority is safety. Safety, 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 knowing that you can trust that you can go in and feel these hard things from your past or current reality, and that you are going to be supported. You're going to be heard. You're going to be okay. Your needs are going to be met. And people just are unaware of that entire concept because they've just been numbing for so many years. And that's why I'm very passionate about this.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I really think that's a big part of doing breath work. In my own experience, I've done a lot of different kinds of breath work just with like being exposed to the amazing friend group that I have and them diving in and just trying to be better versions and becoming better versions of themselves. And me just secondhand being exposed to, activation breath work or holotrophic breath work,
Mm-hmm.
which are much different than, I would assume that how you do breath work and teach breath work as a facilitator. But in my own experience, it was, I had to get out of my own way and stop playing small because I had let other people project their narrative,
Mm-hmm.
their story onto me, and I was accepting what other people were telling of me versus me telling my story. And no one and everyone has a story, right? Everyone has an origin story. It's like when you pick up a book, you have to read the first couple of chapters to gather context of the character, then build the rest of the book.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, our life is very similar to that book. The first half of it may be written, and you get to write the rest of it if you pick up the pen. And
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't really until I started to become aware that I was not living my life how I wanted to for me, and I was living it for other people. And that's a very external, exteroceptive perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Diving into yourself, that's very interoceptive. That's an internal perspective that you're turning the lens internal. Some people call it, the mirror, the sacred mirror, looking at your own sacred mirror and
Mm-hmm.
healing yourself. And that's an internal reflective state of introspection. And
Yeah.
when you're looking outside for things external, you're looking at your phone and you're looking at, perhaps you're watching YouTube videos or podcasts of your favorite motivational coach or someone like that. You're looking for external input, and that input is something that's outside of you. And a lot of people are very much so stuck in that state of exteroceptive perception. They don't want to stop and go in. I see it at screening events. You're like, when's the last time you had your spine checked? They're like, I don't have a spine. Excuse me, how are you walking, sir? How are you walking? And it's like the people are willing to just not look at it. They don't want to look at themselves because they have to actually start doing the work.
Absolutely. The work, right? The work. And what I'm hearing when I'm hearing you speak, it just reminds me of how much gratitude I have for the breath, how much love I have for the breath, because that is what the breath living in you, the breath living in me, the breath teaches me, is that we are meant to have this dance between inhalation and exhalation. Inhalation, exhalation, going out into the world, doing the masculine work, as I call it, exhalation, going inward, doing the feminine work. And they are both meant to serve a purpose. And when you have spent years and years and years, let's say in the masculine, the outside world, that's why people who suddenly have big life events, they just for years, it's like they become a hermit. They go and do this healing because to make up for all that time they were in the masculine, they have this massive exhale and contraction where they go in and shake up this whole world and feel their feels, deal with their trauma. And it does shake things up, but you're supported the entire time. The right people come into your life. It's always perfect. But then what happens is you start to learn these things along the path and you start to realize, ooh, wait, there's a dance here. I go back into the external world, but I don't have to stay there as long because that leads to burnout most of the time if I'm not doing it right. Or truthfully, it just will, because you're not meant to be in inhalation. It's not how the breath flows. So you go out into the external world, you rub up against the edge of growth. You were talking before about what this edge of growth was. I forget the term that you used, but that discomfort that you begin to feel, which is necessary. But when that happens, if you truly are listening and feeling and following that intuition, what I have found to be true in my life and in other people's lives I've observed is you naturally come back into that feminine state. You go inward, you heal, because you're never done healing, right? We're here to do that.
As long as
you go in. Exactly. We're here to evolve, right? So you go inward and you shake up the internal energy world. And what happens is while you're inward and you're doing that, at the same time, your outward world is expanding energetically. And so then you go back out, you come in, and it starts to happen quicker, I think, as you get more skilled with it, because you start to fall into that flow. But what that expansion can feel like for a lot of people is people end up moving maybe into bigger spaces. Your business ends up growing, your community and relationships expand because now you have the energy and capacity to hold that space because you went inward and created that capacity. Your external ends up reflecting it, but there's still work to do. That's the masculine drive. You go into the energetic field and do the things, create, build the business, take the action steps to fill the space. You create it while you were internal, creating it from within in the feminine.
It's such a simple concept. Like when I first started doing any type of breath work, I was like, this is crazy. I'm like, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to do anything. And there's actually a lot of science on how we breathe and the way we breathe. Wim Hof did a lot of research on being able to fight off neurotoxins, cold water exposure, how it de-stresses the nervous system by putting yourself into a very physically demanding state that requires a lot of presence, that the body will always seek survival. The biological machine, the human, is always seeking to survive, to continue to survive. We immerse ourselves in cold water. All of our blood pulls out of our extremities and goes into the core to keep the internal organs alive and keep them warm. It's so fascinating how we can put ourselves in extreme environments or extreme exposures and the body adapts. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a very much so a somatic autonomic response. That's a nervous system response on how we're responding to a said stimulation. We could dive into the psychology of that, but I don't think that's necessarily the conversation we want to have right now. But um, it's just so fascinating that breath work can change the state in which you operate. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it can physiologically change how your hormones are responding, how your physiology is responding to the environment, internal versus external, the conversation
Mm-hmm.
you're having. Um, One thing you talked about was flow, and
Mm-hmm.
as you meditate or you do breath work, and I feel like breath work leads to that meditative state. It you can't. It's kind of they go hand in hand when you find it.
Well, what I'll tell you is so for a lot of people, breath work leads to a meditative state. But one thing I actually wanted to make sure I say here is that knowing what season of life you're in and testing the tools that are out there is necessary, because you could say breath work sounds amazing. Dr. Haley, oh my gosh, tell me all about it. And in this season of life where your nervous system is, I 100% believe that we can find a way to support yourself. But right now, meditation alone and just getting silent and journaling may be the best tool to get you to that next step. For some people, meditation is like, absolutely not. That's the one place I hear my thoughts, and that can't happen, right? That's the season of life that they're in. And so asking someone to go sit in silence just out of nowhere is torture. It's not helping their nervous system at all. And so using tools like breath work, where you can actively think about it to initiate it, so your thoughts have space and attention and some love, they have a purpose there, and then naturally that breath just takes over and get you into that meditative state. Absolutely, that's the easiest, I believe. But for some people, that activation is actually too much, especially for people who've been, we mentioned polyvagal, we mentioned the neurology side of things. People who've been stuck in dorsal vagal for so long, even that little bit of activation, their nervous system says, absolutely not. And so being more gentle when they are introducing the breath, it would be flipped for them. So I'm saying this because when you're trying out these different tools, give yourself grace to say, not in this season, but I'm excited to try it later, because then you start to build the capacity as your nervous system heals to use multiple tools all the time. But start where you are.
And I just want to reiterate that, because I feel like that point right there is absolutely so pertinent in every single person's life. Everyone can use that. I hear so often, "Oh, I'm not ready to start this," or "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a insert this. I don't do breath work," or I'm not a breath
Mm-hmm.
worker," or whatever story a person tells themselves or wants to
Mm-hmm.
create for themselves. And you have to have grace. You have to
Mm-hmm.
honor where you are and where you want to be and where you want to go. Like, you can't just become a professional at anything overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Even for myself, sitting down to journal, to do breath work, or to meditate, I find I'm resistant to it at times. Where
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Huberman in the Huberman Lab, he calls it limbic friction, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going against the grain. It's putting yourself in that state because it is uncomfortable, and that's where the growth lies, by leaning into the friction and leaning
Mm-hmm.
into that. You refer to it as like the masculine,
Mm-hmm.
leaning into the masculine and getting that pushback,
Yeah.
and then
Mm-hmm.
leaning into the feminine and getting supported and loved,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming
Yeah.
back. And it's that
Mm-hmm.
dynamic equilibrium where you're always moving, seeking homeostasis, but always in perpetual motion.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that brings up such a great point in my mind, because I just experienced this yesterday, actually. I've been doing breath work officially, like diving into breath work for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And even last night, just with the season I'm in, I went to a beautiful group breathwork experience, which is extreme. The most powerful you can do is just really allow yourself to be with a community, to be able to work with each other. But even though I was going into such a beautiful feminine experience, which is meant for you to surrender and let the breath and the body do all of the work for you. Like, how nice does that sound? You don't have to do anything. Your breath is going to do everything for you. Surrender into that feminine flow. If your intention is to still, your underlining intention still has that masculine tone of, I need to heal this now. I am laying down, putting my eye mask on, and I'm going to, I mean, that's masculine. Like, what are you doing? And your body is still going to sit there and look at you. I literally pictured, finally, I surrendered. I pictured this other self just looking at me so peacefully, but she's like, are you done yet? Like, are you done yet? You're still trying to force change, even by using these tactics. And so, taking time to even ask yourself, what is my intention? Because this is a beautiful invitation to step into that surrender, but you can bring that masculine tone into it. And when you wonder why it's not working, sometimes you need to take a step back and just ask yourself, what is my intention going into this? And how can I surrender?
Well, I love that because I've experienced that, and it's always, I call it an ego death, right? When I have to move past where my current ego is holding me at, and I find that resistance point where it's a threshold, and I feel like I'm cocooned, and I have to emerge into a new being, and I feel that I go through seasons of this, and it's a reemergence. It's like a phoenix. Um, Dr. Ambrose Cole and I talked a little bit about rebirth and re-death, and how you go through almost like a phoenix. You have to surrender to the death of your ego so that it may emerge anew and more powerful and move forward to protect you through the next journey of life, that next chapter you're experiencing. And it's so true. And
Yeah.
you bring that masculine ego into it where you're trying to control it, and I'm going to put it in a box, and this is what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to breathe, and I'm only going to heal this much. This is all I want to heal. But
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you silly human. It's like you're so much
Mm-hmm.
more than what you think you are. So just
Yeah.
allow yourself to just surrender to
Mm-hmm.
the experience, and then be capital BE.
Mhm. Yes, I love it. That just makes me want to just put my arms up. And I love that you brought that up because the ego has played such a beautiful part of my experience with breath work. And again, when I was more in the mindset shift, right? Release the ego, don't act from a place of ego. There's just a lot of negativity I've personally experienced when it came to learning who the ego is. And in the past year or so, I'm like, my ego, we know, serves a purpose. There are times where we need to say, okay, how can I build a relationship with my ego, knowing that my ego has needs? My ego has the most beautiful desires. Oh my gosh, like the moment I was given permission to let my ego have desires, my life changed because your ego gets to play a part of the story. And the more you actually try to push the ego away or kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it, right? Like continuous ego deaths one after another without allowing the ego to actually play a very, very beautiful part of your life. The more that you won't embody your ego as much, your ego, you just start to notice when your ego starts to get really loud and you're just like, oh, okay, we're getting to that point. What do you need? Like, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's more of a conversation versus this like, and I've had very dramatic ego deaths. I think I'm going through one right now, actually. But it's like, it doesn't, how hard does it have to be? How hard does it have to be? I don't think, you know, stepping out of living in a place of ego has to be big and dramatic. Like a lot of people will talk about or experience, it really can become knowing this part of yourself and when to have a conversation with your ego and making sure you're not embodying it as you're creating the life you desire, like we talked about.
It's it's just, I've read so many books by like Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Thich Nhat Hanh, and just diving into this spiritual quest of like, the ego and the self, and it's you have the duality of your existence is loving both your shadow and your light.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I pursued the ego death really hard initially because I that was what I was trying to kill, was my ego.
Mm-hmm.
And then as myself emerged, it was, I was still objectifying and killing my ego, and then it was, now it's overbearingly feminine, and then
Mm-hmm.
now it's the balance of trying to get
Yeah.
two to be able to just sit with each other and enjoy each other's presence.
Yep. Yep. It's uh, inner child work is a whole other thing, but it is almost like you're talking to a child sometimes, right? Because your future self, that higher part of you, is so intelligent, right? And we have access to that when we're getting in the body and truly listening and being able to feel the subtleties of that guidance, because it's whispers, right? The ego is really loud and always controlling. But I actually had an experience this week that I'd love to share because it was so beautiful. But I was doing this energy work again. I've been in a very masculine place. Even when entering these experiences, I'm like, I've got something to fix. There's a block here. Like, why am I going through whatever I'm going through right now? And so I went into this energetic experience, and I'm sitting here trying to like go up, right? Like, I'm trying to tap into this higher self and give me the answers so that I can move through this now. And then all of a sudden, it's like I look down, and my little ego is just sitting there like, why are you abandoning me? Like, you keep trying to like break through and become this self, but like I have needs also. And like and like I felt it as my ego. Like my ego was so upset because like, how much energy work and spiritual work are you going to do for me to die? Like, I do have a part here, and like, you're making me want to hold on more. But like, I'm done. I'm exhausted. And then I just came down, and when we had a conversation, that is when things really shifted. That was the surrender, right? It was just like, oh, you do have a voice also. You do. And it's important. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So you mentioned dorsal vagal, and that's not a term I'm super common with.
Mhm.
But before we jump into that, I want to hear from our amazing sponsors that allow this podcast to happen, and then we'll jump right into that.
Imaging Services' primary business is chiropractic solutions. With over 45 years in the industry of helping chiropractors, Michael Tokash offers free consultations on building your business. In the past year, Imaging Services has installed over 100 X-ray machines and digital X-ray systems in over 42 states across the United States. For more, head to theimagingservices.com.
And we are those amazing sponsors that allow this podcast to happen. Truly are exceptional.
Mhm.
So
So you're sorry, you're saying you're asking about dorsal vagal, correct?
yeah, dorsal vagal. What does that mean? I've heard of dorsal vagal and ventral vagal, but enlighten us.
Let's talk about it. So this is when we start to get into the sciencey part, right? Which is super fun for my people who I want the knowledge behind what all this energy work you're talking about. Sounds nice. What's going on? And so when we get into polyvagal theory, we are specifically talking about the vagus nerve, which is also known as the wandering nerve, because it leaves from your brain, it goes all throughout the body, and it is really monitoring that internal state that we're talking about, but from a visceral level. Okay. So dorsal vagal is actually when we are in that dormant state, that stuck state. This is where we usually see people who've been chronically in fight or flight for so long that their body has run out of so much energy that they swing into that dorsal vagal state. And this is when we start to tend to see people who tend to isolate. They don't have a lot of energy. They might be easily depressed. There's just not a lot of life in them. And when people are stuck there, it's really hard to get out. But that's what I have found is really where people end up after years and years of not living in their authentic life power that we've been discussing for this entire call.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've heard that called a functional freeze, where it's
Mm.
simply you're stuck in a program loop where you don't break out of that feedback loop. You're essentially running the same programs over and over and over. Uh, Potentially, it could be out of fear of change. Or I mean, I'm not one to say. I think that's a subjective uh, experience based on the individual. But functional freeze, like myself, with my own experiences like PTSD and depression, I'll catch myself where I'll start to seclude myself or isolate myself, and I'll start pulling away from people, and that's a functional freeze pattern where it's a feedback
Mm-hmm.
loop where I'm negatively, I'm creating negative feedback in myself by reducing my contact with people to isolate myself because I'm pulling away out of fear of connection.
Mm. I love that you shared that. Like, thank you so much. And this comes back to me the importance of meeting yourself where you're at, because when we are meant to be in cycles, right, as humans, and when we start to have these breakthroughs and we're meditating for 30 minutes a day, and then I'm doing breath work during my lunch break, you're doing all the things and you're thriving, you're feeling abundant, you're feeling love, you're feeling gratitude. Your unique winter is going to come around at some point, right? Whether that's in winter or that's in the summer, your unique season where things come to the surface because they're meant to. This is when you might find yourself potentially in what I'm hearing. I've never heard that term before, but where you find yourself in a loop and you're like, I don't know where to get out of this. You are able to meet yourself where you're at. And for me, it's been starting from the beginning. I'm like, where did I first start my health journey? I'm
Mm.
like, gratitude practice. That's like the easiest thing for me, but to get a pen and paper out, and no matter what mood I'm in, I can start writing down gratitude. And what I notice is doing that consistently, again, it doesn't matter. I'm not shifting my energy. I'm not doing breath work. I'm not doing anything crazy. All I have the capacity for is to show up for myself for 10 minutes and write 10 things I'm grateful for. And having an accountability partner is really huge too. Co-regulation, having that support, showing you don't have to be alone. And what you'll find is that life energy just starts to spark a little bit more. And you're like, okay, maybe my next step is I'm going to go for my walks. I haven't been doing my walks. No run, no crazy exercise, even though maybe before you were maxing out, you're not comparing yourself to that last cycle. Give yourself grace and say, right now, I started a new cycle. Let's start from the beginning. What I tend to find is each cycle, though, when you come back to this place, you get through it much quicker. You're not going to be, and I'm saying the word staying. There's nothing wrong with like do all the things, but like your comparison of like what's a good meditation or what's a good breathwork session, you're going to move through those steps so much quicker and be back where you were and more. Um, and you'll shock yourself. But like I truly believe we have these resets. And they usually tend to come after ego death, from my understanding. It's like a reset of like, who am I again? Holy shit. And then you've just got to start from those basics and build up from there again. And that's when your tool belt begins to just really build up. Yeah.
Well, I love that you're really talking about leaning into the discomfort, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to lean outside of your comfort zone. I know that Suki Mooker, he was the first person that really exposed me to expanding yourself in meditation and pushing your boundaries. You don't have to push yourself 30%, 50%,
Mm-hmm.
70%. Like 10% is perfect. Just
Mm-hmm.
10%. Give yourself 10% more, and you're not going to overexpose yourself. You're not going to go beyond something that you're able to be able to experience and I think really integrate. Because if you give yourself 10%, you're stepping outside of your known comfort zone into that
Mm-hmm.
10% of discomfort, which it can be uncomfortable. For some people, 10% can be a lot. To
Mm-hmm.
some people people that climb Mount Everest, you know, their exposure, like 80%. They need 80% exposure. So they're like, I need to really push myself to the brink of death to really hit that threshold. But that doesn't always have to be that way, right? I mean, it can be
Mm-hmm.
depending on the season. Just sitting down and spending 10 minutes. The research, I believe, is anywhere from 5 to 13 minutes of just silence and just sitting and listening and creating awareness has shown scientific results or clinical results that improve focus, decrease stress,
Mm-hmm.
improve cognitive thought process. What else was it? It was increased mood, hormonal,
Mm-hmm.
and just using your breath to help facilitate that is I, I keep thinking about the movie Wall-E, where towards the end of it, everyone's sitting in, their floating chairs with a TV screen in front of them, and they have food constantly being poured into them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're obviously not healthy, and they're not
Mm-hmm.
using their body. So it's like, are they breathing? It's like,
Yeah.
are we being trained not to breathe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being programmed, and as we mentioned a little bit ago in the conversation, having that choice and doing this work to be able to go inward, and um, it's taking ownership of your life. Like, I truly believe that, like, doing this work and having that space to question, where in my day. Joe Dispenza is one of my favorite people. I've been following him for years, and his meditations I do right now in the season, in the mornings and at night. And the evening ones is all about reflecting on your day, and where in your day did you go from conscious action, thoughts, and behaviors into unconscious thoughts and programs. And just being able to reflect on your day and say, oh, okay, I checked out there. I was totally running off a program. In that moment, you ask yourself, so what would you have done if you were in choice and consciously choosing those thoughts and actions? And then the next day, what ends up happening is you are in the moment, taking that time to be still. You're going to start showing up more consciously all throughout your day, more and more and more, which is when you know that you are creating your life, because you're not running off those programs that the world is constantly trying to tell you what to do, eat, buy, who to be with, what relationships look like. It's like, why don't I say what relationships look like, And that's when you take your power back, is you give yourself that space and that time to create, so that you can show up knowing that you're in choice in each moment of the day.
I love that. And so how can we access polyvagal theory with breath work? Do those two overlap? Are they interconnected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love, absolutely. This is where I start to nerd out. So we know this is all about the nervous system, right? And so as chiropractors, this is where we thrive. Specifically, when we're talking polyvagal, the breath alone physically is, you're having that energy and that motion going in through the body and out through the body. So it's already massaging that vagus nerve. That's why people use other tools like gargling water, humming, using your voice to activate your vagus nerve and helping with vagal tone, to be able to change your state, have a healthier adapting nervous system, right? So physically, the breath alone, just having conscious awareness of the breathing and doing consistent patterns, is very healthy for your vagus nerve, making sure the tone is taken care of. When it comes to facilitating, as well as just diving into your own breathwork experience, it's really knowing where the person's nervous system is at, right? So I mentioned a little bit before, if someone's at dorsal vagal state, and that is their resting state, we're not going to jump in and say, we're going to do a triactive breath in, or we're going to do holotrophic breathing, and you're going to just expand all of this energy. It's like, whew, my nervous system is not even prepared. There is such thing as traumatizing yourself through healthy things such as breath work, which is why we are trauma informed, and being able to recognize when someone is actually traumatizing themselves. Usually I find by what their intention may be. Like, I want to break past this. I'm going to force this.
Hmm.
We do enough of forcing in the world. No, we're gonna flow into it. We're gonna surrender into it. So someone who's more in a dorsal vagal state as a resting tone, we're gonna take it really gentle, very easy, and probably do a lot more stillness and just listening to the breath. And then honoring that when the breath is ready, the breath is going to pick up the pace, and it's going to go at its own timing. And that's where you start to learn how to build self-trust and self-respect for what you can handle. What does that 10% look like for me?
Hmm.
That's where you start to ask those questions. Someone who is more in that sympathetic tone, right? Sympathetic is beautiful. And I'm saying this because I think when we get into chiropractic education, it's very easy to say, like, we want to take you from sympathetic and bring you down to parasympathetic, right? Fight or flight, bring you to rest and digest. That's where we heal. And I think that's still great, because most people are living in sympathetic most of the time. But education wise, understanding that sympathetic serves a purpose, right? To push us out those comfort zones so that we grow and build higher tolerance, it's necessary. But if someone's in that chronic sympathetic state, they have a lot of energy, they don't know how to slow themselves down, their mind's racing 100 miles per hour. All right, we're still going to use slowing that breath down to be able to just bring us into parasympathetic. Okay. Now, my favorite is when we're in ventral vagal, which is more of your socializing. We are able to connect with people very easily. We're able to have flexibility between sympathetic, parasympathetic. We have a very healthy being. We are able to use breath to ramp up your system so that we can practice holding more energy and stepping into whatever it is you desire, right? So some of those higher frequencies that require a lot of energy, abundance, stepping into that higher self, like feeling who you are with more energy, we're able to access those areas. And so we're going to use breath patterns that are going to purposely activate you into that place so that you're going outside of that 10%, right? That 10% outside of what your current edge is of your energy field so that we can train our nervous system for this to be the new norm. And I like that resting state is something my mentor says a lot in breathwork is when we're doing these practices, what we're ultimately doing is we're creating new resting states. Because if this is my resting state right here, there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. Okay. But when we can use the breath consistently to raise our resting state to a frequency of gratitude, to a frequency of love, we're already at a high resting state. And our ability to have these highs and lows, but still remain resting here becomes our being. Like, why is it that she's just grateful all the time? I'm not having to trick myself into being grateful all the time. I've made it so that my resting state is at this frequency. And when I have my lows, because we're human, it's going to happen. My resting state goes whoop right back up to here. This is my norm. And we have tools to be able to decide where our resting states are during different seasons.
That's so fascinating because you can use your breath to modulate the state in which you live your life and how you experience life.
Yeah. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it comes down to, with what you just said, it comes down to creating space for all of it. Because in order for you to choose your resting state, you have to know that at the same time that you're choosing love, right? You're choosing gratitude. At the same time, there are still parts of you, because you're human, that have shame. There's still parts of you that have anger and fear and all these emotions that are a beautiful part of the human experience. But most of us don't want to feel it at all. What ends up happening is they build and build and build to where we have no choice, and it ends up becoming our resting state. It's almost like we get pulled down instead of being here and letting those parts of ourselves have space, be heard, be seen, be expressed. Go grab your pillow, go scream. It's one of my favorite new activities. I love screaming. And allow those parts to still have space in who you are, and surround yourself around people who also know that and love that and provide safety for you to be able to express those parts of you. And because it has room, you're able to still have the capacity to say, I see you, and I still choose this. I see you, I hear you, I feel you. And because I allow it to come up, be felt, and flow out, I have the capacity to still choose my resting state and have that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does because
Cool.
in my own experience, I was struggling with expression. I was struggling with allowing my emotions. I had bottled my emotions up for so long that whenever I started to allow my emotions to be exposed, I didn't know how to express my emotions. I didn't know how to be expressive. I typically overpoured, and that sometimes can be very off-putting to a lot of people because you have to figure out how to be expressive, how to express your emotions, how to emote your emotions. And in my own experience, I came across a dance, a traditional ceremonial dance that's held in Japan, that they actually have professional actors and dancers that will dress up as specific emotions, and they will embody that emotion. And as they dance through the city, they embody that emotion so intently and innately that when you see the person performing the gestures and the expressive emotions as they're moving, that then draws up that emotion inside you and actually you release it and you give it to the person, and they then
Mm,
embody and continue moving forward. So it's almost like a release,
yeah.
like a ceremonial release of your emotions, because we do have these emotions inside of us. The book, The Body Keeps the Score, is a phenomenal read that dives into how our nervous system retains information and stores it until we go in, we look at it, we express it, we integrate it, and we allow it to no longer become static. Emotion is energy in motion, and emotions that are not in motion, they are static, stuck, they are dissonant, and they're not allowing you to be at your highest expressive
Mhm.
vibration or expression.
Yeah. Not only is this is my favorite thing to say, not only is stored emotions, stored energy in the body, right? Because they're not being expressed, but that is your stored potential. Those places that you're wanting to go, guess where you're going to get that energy from, buddy? Going inward and taking all that balled up energy, that's your stored potential that's ready to go out and make moves into the world. Like, how exciting is that? You got it right there. Go access it. But I'm glad you brought up expression, because that's a huge conversation I've been having with people, is when we do things like breath work or energy work where we're moving and shifting energy. I love that. But having that safety, like we've talked about, not only to feel like, that's what I would say would be another level, is like, okay, I have safety in my body. I can go feel these parts of myself. What do I do with them? That is when you have tools to go express. And that is a very important part of the process. Because if not, it's like you bring all this stuff up to the surface and you're like, oh, I see my anger, I see my grief, and it's heavy. And we can actually begin to embody it, like you're saying, like we'll show up that way because we just don't, we're trying our best to do the work, but we don't know what to do with these emotions.
Hmm?
But we have not been taught how to express it. Not only have we not been taught, but a lot of us have seen unhealthy ways that these emotions have balled up, either in the family unit or in interactions with relationships we've had in the past. And so then you're fearful of it in general. It's like, I don't know what to do with it. And I'm actually scared because the way I've seen it expressed was not healthy for me or anybody else around me. And that usually is coming from a good place of, I don't want to hurt people when I'm angry. So I just won't be angry. And it's like, it will come out, I promise. But coming to that, that is where, when you're breathing, in order for you to create relationships of safety as a reflection, we know comes from having safety in your own body, that when you have anger come up, you are going to stay with that and honor that anger and still love that anger. You're not going to be the one who says judgment, shame. You're not allowed to have anger. So having that safety within yourself, that those emotions are okay and a natural part of the human process, begins to attract relationships that are able to help co-regulate when, let's say, I'm feeling anger for the first time and it doesn't always come out healthy. I'm actually going through this right now. I'm very blessed to have people in my life who are very safe for me to have anger spills or like get a little sassy. And I'm like, and I get to go back and say, I'm sorry. I'm practicing using my voice for the first time in years, and it came out in an explosive way. And having people who are able to say, I still love you. That's okay. I mean, let's talk about it. Let's talk about tools to like be able to communicate differently. But I know it's okay. You're going to attract a whole different environment.
And I feel like just reiterating this, you talked about building a relationship with your ego. And I really think that goes back to that conversation of just surrendering and accepting and not judging. I think one of the hardest things in today's society is to not judge yourself or another person. We have all of these external influences that are telling us what we should look like, what we should dress like, what we should talk like, what we should drive, what we should wear. All the material 3D things. We're being told what we should be and do, but how many of us are asking those questions internally and getting the answers and then going out and doing them, and doing it unconditionally with love,
Mm-hmm.
grace, gratitude, and honesty, radical honesty with yourself? If you're miserable at your job and you don't want to be there, quit.
Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to subject ourselves to misery.
Mm-hmm.
mean, I feel like, especially in America, that's what we've built ourselves up and what
Yeah.
we're always doing. But I want to go over a couple of things because some call to actions. I love to leave some call to actions for the group. And you talked about gratitude practice, doing a daily gratitude practice, or even a weekly gratitude practice, setting some goals for gratitude practice, preferably doing it daily. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, an accountability partner. If you're looking to dive in to do breath work and to do some more internal work, accountability and having someone that's going to hold you there, to hold you responsible, do it with you, or just hold you to the standard that you set for yourself. Ownership of your life, being in charge of your life. You are the master of your vessel. You are the master of your destiny. You have to believe that. And I really think that's a part of the work as well, is learning how to be the master of yourself. Choosing your resting state. I love this because being able to choose what our resting state is. Or am I going to be that high anxiety, you know, caffeine driven, adrenal fatigue person, or am I going to be cool, calm, collected, rested, under control, like understanding where I'm at, how I'm feeling, how I'm responding to my internal environment as well as my external environment. Then emoting, getting your expressive nature out there, learning to get uncomfortable, diving into that limbic friction. If you're embarrassed to go out and dance, take dance, watch some YouTube videos, like go out there and just like, I dance around the house all the time because no one's watching. And when I go out in public, if I'm comfortable dancing at home, I'm probably going to dance in public because I'm doing a little jig and I think it's cool. So it builds confidence. Learning to express yourself really does build confidence. And finally, having safety within yourself and your expressions.
Hmm.
Did I miss anything? Did you want to add anything to that call to action list?
I think that's a beautiful list. Yeah, you did great.
Thanks. I think just building a list and building some goals so we can move forward and continue to do the work,
Mhm.
show up, be a better mirror, a bigger,
Mhm.
brighter mirror. And
I do have something to add. Sorry.
go
A
over it.
very important add actually is going back to give yourself grace.
Mm,
Give yourself grace. So you're going to do these things. You're going to go and do the breath work. You're going to feel things, and giving yourself grace to meet yourself where you're at every day, I think, is a huge part to incorporate with all of those.
absolutely. I could not agree more. So, Dr. Haley, where can we find you? How do we get a hold of you? If someone wants to get a hold of Dr. Haley and ask her about her breathwork facilitation and diving into that, some polyvagal theory or anything else, where can we find you?
The first place would, and the easiest place would be on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is going to be underscore Haley Turpin, and that is spelled out Haley Turpin, Turpin. I know there's a lot of Haleys out there. And then on my Instagram, you can send me a direct message. Truthfully, the best way would be I have a link on my profile that will share a little bit more about my story. And then there will be a link for us to just have about 30 minutes to connect. See where you are, what your needs are. If you know where your needs are, right, we can start there and just see what tools we can provide for you to move forward, especially when it comes to the breath. There's just so many things we can do with it that we didn't even dive into today, and really get to know yourself deeper with that. So that would be the easiest way.
Awesome. Guys, ladies, gentlemen, make sure you reach out to Dr. Haley. Dive into breath, find your purpose, find gratitude daily, get an accountability partner to dive in, reach out to Haley, set up a plan. If you need someone, she is phenomenal. She's helped me, she's helping me, she's going to help me. Um, Such a beautiful soul. Dr. Haley, thank you for being here and just spending an hour of your time with us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Brent. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Make sure y'all reach out. As always, thank you for being here. It's a Legendary Chiropractor podcast. We will see you next week. Light and love.